to Freshly Forever, a podcast that gives you fascinating insights week after week. Here's your host, Vi Kumar.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode on podcast Freshly Forever. Today we have a guest who is actually a returning guest on the show, and that's Dr.Jeannine Jannot. So pleased to have her here again with us. Dr. Jannot has a master's degree in school psychology from the Ohio State University and a doctorate in child and developmental psychology from the University of Connecticut. She has also been a college instructor teaching psychology courses and freshman seminars. And she's also the author of The Disintegrating Students, a wonderful book that provides a roadmap to navigate the daunting journey through today's high-stakes, high-stress education experience. Welcome, Jeannine, to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Oh, same here. And I guess last time we talked all about, modern-day student life and its impact on students and parents alike. But I guess it's worth focusing on achievement culture and how that plays into the life of a student. So how about we get started with what is achievement culture, and have we been seeing this only recently, Jeannine?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question because I've spent the last couple of years talking about our disintegrating students and what that looks like, and what at the root of the disintegrating student, which is the part that fascinated me, is like, why are these students falling apart? It makes sense. At the root of that, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the root cause is this achievement culture. And, as far as is it something new? Is it just recent? Humans have been educating humans for centuries. And, it's only been in the last, few decades that we're seeing the rise of this, what I call the achievement culture. So it's, in long-term scope, it's definitely something new. But as far as, our immediate experiences go, this has been going on for several generations, probably starting right around the time we were in high school or moving out of high school. So it's been developing over a long time. And just to give a definition of what I think it is, I think it's really important to understand what we mean by culture. And I like to define culture in psychological terms, which the definition in psychology is culture is a set of ideas, behaviors, attitudes, and traditions, that exist within large groups of people, and they're passed on from generation to generation. And they're typically pretty resistant to change. So what we're seeing here is, I equate it to a fish in water. If you ask a fish how the water is, the fish is like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just in the water. I don't notice the water. And so when we talk about anything that's culture related, it's impacting how we behave, how we think, what our attitudes and assumptions are, but we're really not aware of it. And so the achievement culture has been promoting the ideas and assumptions and traditions around high stakes, high pressure, high rigor, pushing this early and earlier on our students. And, what we're seeing and how that impacts our students as far as how they disintegrate, we're seeing that rigor outpacing their skills and their developmental readiness. And so it just doesn't end well.
Okay. And how then do you think students respond to this scenario? I mean, it looks like, like we are now in this ever-changing world, and, we are just, like you said over there, high stakes, high rigor. How are the students responding to it? As an expert on evaluating and sort of, working with disintegrating students, how then do you feel students respond to this situation?
Well, first and foremost, they're responding with mental health issues.
That's sad.
Yeah. So we're seeing way more anxiety, depression, suicidality, eating disorders. I mean, you kind of name it, and we're seeing it at younger and younger age and larger numbers. So that's So when I think about how it's impacting them, I'd say first and foremost, it's that in that mental wellness space. And then the trickle down from that is it starts impacting them at school, because it's very hard to think when you're in a state of threat. So if your nervous system is on threat mode, I have to achieve perfectly. I've got all this pressure on me. It's do or die with the grades and the GPA and the test scores. If that's how you're functioning, you're not a very good learner. Your brain is not open to learning in that state. And how that translates into day-to-day being a student is our students have the philosophy that I need to go to school and check the box. I need to do whatever I need to do just to get the grade. Cheating has become a tool, a strategy that our students use, and it's very, it's almost well accepted as far as like, yeah, that's what you do to check those boxes. I also think it's impacting our kids' relationships, particularly family relationships, because of all the pressure. This does not set up, especially teens and parents to get along swimmingly, which it's already challenging enough, the adolescent parent relationship, but you throw in all this, all these expectations and all this pressure and the mental health issues, it becomes very, very challenging. And I think ultimately our kids just kind of walk away feeling like they're not enough. They're just not good enough. They're not smart enough. They're just not doing enough. And that's causing a problem.
Okay. And do you seem to find that across the board, to be one and the same, or like a certain percentage of students, though they kind of feel it, but they are able to handle it better, while the others, kind of completely fall prey to the situation, unfortunately? So I guess that's one part of it. And the other part would be, then are all students able to find, you mentioned test scores. So are they able to find a test score based system conducive to their learning and development, Jannine?
I think the important question to ask is, what's the intent of the test scores? What is the value add here? What are we getting from it? And I think we've just, the execution of how we assess students has become problematic. And I actually just got done reading a really interesting, really thought-provoking book called 10 Things Schools Get Wrong and How We Can Get Them Right, by Jared Cooney Horvath and David Bott. And they had a really great chapter on grading. And what they were saying is that we really need to differentiate between assessing our kids and grading our kids. And they gave a interesting analogy of like those radar speed signs where you drive past and your speed gets flashed at you. So you get that feedback, you're going 45 in a 25, and it starts flashing and I need to slow down. So that's an assessment. That's an assessment of your speed. Now, if you drove past that same sign and it flashed a C+ at you, it's telling you something. It's saying, well, you're not good enough. But compared to what, do I need to go faster or do I need to go slower? You're not getting that feedback that actually, fuels learning. So I think grades have fallen more into that trap of just being this, what's the right way of saying it? Just way to rank our kids. So it's like, okay, well, you're not as good as this kid, or you're
like
not as good.
Norm, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Versus, here's where you are in your learning. Here's where you are in your mastery of this, without the message that you're just not good enough. You're bad at this. Instead of being like, you're just on the journey of learning this. I mean, think of math. Think of how many kids say, I'm just bad at math, and how that impacts their interests, their motivation, all the things that impact learning, get a raw deal there. Versus if students didn't have the expectation, you have to be here in this ranking of it to be good at math. So, I mean, that's a big ask to try to, because grades have been around for a long, long time. But again, I think the execution and what's behind that high rigor, high pressure push from the achievement culture has made grades rather dysfunctional. And I would think teachers may agree with that as well, that it's not giving them the information they need either.
Oh, yes. And what hiccups then do students face? And obviously, it's impacting their morale, like you touched upon when you were responding earlier. So, what actually do you see students facing? I mean, you really even in your opening remarks, you mentioned about mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to just zero in on hiccups, what would you say to that?
Well, I think it's driving a population of kids to be more perfectionistic than is helpful. So sort of maladaptive perfectionism has become fairly common in our students, particularly, higher achieving students. And I mean, you kind of touched on that, like, why do some students fall prey to becoming a disintegrating students and others don't? And perfectionism actually plays a role there. So what ends up happening, the achievement culture sets these very high expectations, and because teachers are in the culture, colleges, universities are in the culture, parents are in the culture, students, we're all in the culture, so that everybody's sharing these very high expectations, and students are like, okay, I guess I have to figure out how to meet these. And as sort of the adults in the life of students, teachers, parents, we say what we think are encouraging things, like, hey, do your best, we just want you to reach your potential. We get really frustrated when we don't see good effort being put in. But how those kids hear that, who start to become more perfectionistic, is I need to do 100% of the things at 100% of the time. So they're looking for perfection, and that doesn't exist. So when we say just do your best, well, to a kid who's perfectionistic, that's impossible. So that's why they start, procrastinating, putting off these things, because they feel unsuccessful, they feel unworthy, they feel not good enough. And that's really probably one of the bigger drivers of anxiety in our kids today.
Don't you think, that's probably impacting them in being able to, what shall I say, absorb the material and learn everything, as opposed to, just kind of like, okay, this is the tune, let me just fall in line with the tune, let me just adapt myself to this song, however it's played, correct?
Correct. And just like I said before, if their brain is in threat mode, their nervous system is on high alert, that, this is a threatening situation. My self-esteem's on the line, my reputation's on, whatever they feel is on the line, their brain is not in the best space to be learning and be curious.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, teachers probably feel it. So what role do you think teachers should play at this point to be able to help students better? I mean, I guess overnight, you and I are not going to be able to change the system, but I think only conversations like these can lead to something. I mean, you pointed out that very nice book, earlier on in this conversation, and you have your own book, that's, we are just going to get to that a little bit more in detail later on in this conversation. But I guess that example of, the flashing light when someone is speeding is great, rather than that light saying, oh, you're a C plus, or you're a, like a B minus, whatever that might be.
Yeah. What does that even mean?
How can teachers help students better?
Teachers just need to be allowed to be teachers. Teachers are the experts when it comes to teaching students. And one of the big problems in education today, and I don't think, the big problem in education is the achievement culture. I think we know how to educate other humans. We've been doing it a long time. We're really good at that. Fundamentally, we know how to do that. The problem is we are not letting our teachers walk in the room and develop programs, policies, and practices for our kids. Instead, we look at, corporations and big money interests, in testing, and politicians are, have their, and even research, they have their hand in this, and then they tell teachers what to do. And sometimes that doesn't translate wonderfully into the classroom. So teachers are stuck. So I think we need to untie their hands, and we need to look at them to tell us what they need, the classroom to look like.
Mm-hmm.
They need power and respect.
Sure. But even aside from that, aside from the stage and state when they really get it, but as a teacher, and as a counselor, like as an expert in working with disintegrating students, how are you able to, at least handle it for now? Just so, whoever is listening to this podcast can, derive that, whatever the basic starting points at this stage.
Yeah. So within the constraints of the current culture that we're in, I think communication, I think listening to our students, giving them to be the experts on themselves. So I think students are giving us a lot of information. We're not responding well to it because it doesn't fit within the expectation of how things are supposed to go. So, I think we just have to pay attention to our kids and what they're saying. And again, this check the box mentality does not serve them well. So how could we, maybe at a pretty basic level, how could we reduce the number of, graded tests? Could we go to more project-based learning? Could we go to more, make a portfolio, demonstrate your work? There's all kinds of ways that we can kind of, tests are important. They're, they have their use, but when that's it's really snuffing out the learning process, I think, for a lot of students. So to figure out, how do we teach kids, and then how do we figure out what they're learning, where they are, and how to help them in that process without overwhelming their nervous systems.
And I think you really pointed out one aspect, communication. And right there, I think if an educator can make their student feel welcome, that's probably half the battle won, correct?
Yes. And again, they want to feel like they're enough. And, if they're not getting that message as subtle and as unintentioned as it may be coming from the adult, that's really what they're seeking. They want to know that they're good enough.
Oh, absolutely. How then do we tweak this scenario? I mean, can the system be tweaked to, say, help serve both students and educators to stay motivated?
I hope so. I think we'd have to start with redefining success. There's nothing wrong with an achievement culture. The problem is our achievement. We want our kids to achieve, obviously. We want everybody to achieve. But right now we're in that culture. We're defining success as data points. So it's your GPA, it's the scholarship you got, it's your ACT, SAT score. And those kinds of things are promoting the check the box mentality. We need to get back to something more akin to, valuing the learning process, valuing curiosity, resilience, hope, all the things, more value-based approach to achievement. And it needs to be a bottom-up approach. So again, going back to the educators and students who are, on the ground, the grassroots, figuring this out day to day, and then work our way up, the ladder from them telling us these programs, practices, and policies would be helpful, and let them try those out, see how they work out, and implement things that are working, that demonstrate good learning and better mental health outcomes, instead of focusing from, the, top down, which is really the corporations and the political interests that are influencing education.
Okay. And how about any relevance of growth mindset or fixed mindset um, in the context of whatever we are talking? I mean, I know you touch upon that beautifully in your book. So does that have any relevance as to how a student, perceives themselves to be?
It does. And, we're not born with a fixed mindset. So the fixed mindset individual doesn't really, it's a very protective mindset. It feels, you feel like you're as smart as you are and you can't get any smarter. So when you start to, reach that rigor point, you're getting some feedback that says you're not smart anymore. And that causes a shutdown as far as like being willing to put in effort, being willing to challenge yourself. It's a very defensive mindset to be in. And we want our students to move into a growth mindset. And if you think of a little child, a baby, a toddler, they're a huge growth mindset. They try everything, they take risks, they involved in challenges, they just continue to grow. And at some point, particularly in education today, we are sort of cultivating our students to have more of that fixed mindset. And that is decreasing their well-being, because it's a very threatening space to be in. Again, it increases the likelihood they're going to potentially have anxiety around school and stressors around school. And it's not helping their achievement because, again, they're going to back off challenges and they're going to self-handicap and do things like that if they feel like they're not going to be successful. But I definitely think the fixed mindset is contributing to how our students are disintegrating, but I think it's misguided to think that just shifting their mindset will get them high achieving again. Because I think, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, is I think that our mindset has more of an influence over our mental well-being, which then in a trickle down manner is going to impact achievement. So, I think our goal when we look at mindset is to think, we can't just slap on some program like, here's what a growth mindset is, and here's what you should do. And, that's a start, but it needs to come from all angles. It needs to come from home. It needs to come from school. And the intention, I think, would be better if we're focusing more on their mental well-being versus this is going to make you a better student.
Oh, can't emphasize that enough, right? The mental well-being and how it trickles down. I mean, I think you have said it nice and loud and clear here. And you pointed out something here, home front and what we do at home. So what about the role of parents? Are we contributing to this also?
Yeah, sadly we are. Again, we're very well intentioned in how we respond to our kids, but we are in the culture, so we're in the water. And for us, it's all about how we as parents are defining success for our kids. So I think the default way is to sort of go with it's the GPA, it's the grades, it's the college acceptance. This means you're a successful student. High standardized test scores and so on. So, but our response to that, to make sure that they get that success, is to be really helpful in doing things like providing resources, if we can, for tutors and test prep and private schools and summer camps. And we're trying to eke out every possible increment of improvement and every data point increment increase we can. And I think this translates to our kids as what I hear often is, I think my parents care more about my grades than they do me. And parents are, in effect, they are showing them that the grades are important because they're so concerned about the data points and what success looks like. And this is a really hard issue because it's hard to be the one parent that goes, okay, well, we're not going to worry about your GPA and we're not going to worry about what college you get into, and you just go. And it it's kind of impractical to kind of go the entire other way. But I think parents can help the situation quite a bit by just having honest conversations with their kids, like talking about why grades are important in this culture. What does it mean to us as a family? What if you get a B or a C? How do we look at you if that happens? I think kids need to hear that explicitly, that, you know what? You're still a good person if you get a C. You're still a smart kid if you get a C. We understand, the environment that we're in and the impact it's having on all of us. So let's come up with some parameters within this achievement culture and make it work for us. And I think that may do a lot to protect the mental well-being of our students when they feel like the parents get it and they're on their side. Does that make sense?
I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm just in awe at whatever you're saying, because again and again, everything is so connected to the mental well-being and how we achieve that. Back in a moment with our guest on Freshly Forever. But help me here, Jannine. Is this then a matter of a few parents raising their hands and saying, hey, I own up to the fact that my kid did not get like a 1400 and above on an SAT, or say like 31 or 32 on an ACT, or the fact that, okay, out of the 5 colleges that are in my vicinity, and 2 of them are like, say, top notch, like everything, it's so well talked about in the country. But the other 2 or 3 may not be something that everybody around, in the other states or outside of the country may know. But hey, give up all the so-called quote unquote shame aspect and be able to own up and say, hey, that's what my kid is doing. My kid got like a 1200 on her SAT. And guess what? She's going to this community college or whatever it may be. So is that something that can help be a trendsetter for the future?
It would be great, because that would fundamentally start to change the culture. Because then that would be the expectation. And we just have to normalize normal when it comes to education, because that's normal. Not every kid is going to get a 32 on their ACT. And not every kid is going to have a 4.0 plus GPA. And, for the kid who has a 3.75 GPA, who's clearly very capable, for them to feel not smart, not worthy, not good enough, it's just not okay. So I do, and I feel like it's like glacial, but I do feel like we're slowly moving in that direction. I think, the pandemic helped a little bit there, because I think we all got a huge dose of realism around school, and what our kids are experiencing, what our teachers are experiencing. So, baby steps, but yes, I think that's like the small role each of us can play as parents, to start moving the ball in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say, okay, encourage your kid to, or just have this conversation. Like you said, it's important for parents and the tweens and teens in our lives to have conversations, or even the elementary school kids, because I think all the peer pressure and the societal demands start right from there, even from kindergarten, unfortunately, we are setting expectations. But I guess we are not trying to say in this process, hey, it's okay, rest assured, slack off. And, you don't have to just show up at your SAT, but I don't care, given that you're smart, you're probably already going to hit that 1100, but I don't care. I mean, that's not what we are trying to say here, correct?
Correct. And it's all about perspective, and it's bigger than the grade and the score. Again, if we have the mindset that we're going to focus more on the learning process than the data check the box aspect of it, the questions I would ask a student if they were telling me, I got a C on a test, or I scored really low in the SAT, or lower than expected kind of thing, is, here's what I want to know, what's behind it? Did you have access to the information? For some reason, did you miss instruction or not have the learning materials? What was that instruction delivered well? Was it clear, accurate, understandable? Was it at your appropriate level? Did you study? Did you review? Did you self-test that information so you knew what you know and don't know? Because that's the whole point of studying. And what was your mental and physical state while you were being tested? Were you coming down with something? Were you sick? Were you hungry? Were you upset about, an interaction you had with a parent or a peer? There are all kinds of things that impact our performance. And we don't talk about that very often.
Mm-hmm. And what do we say to those parents who are going to ask, say, hey, I'm willing to do all that, but I'm just worried that my kid may not land with the very best possible job offer, if they don't go to the right college or whatever it may be. Because certain companies, unfortunately, they don't look at the whole spectrum. They just look at, okay, this is where I'm going. So what then can we do to make those parents feel comfortable to come out of that shell, so to speak, and give up that quote unquote shame factor in alluding to the fact that, hey, okay, this is what my kid was able to do, and I'm still happy about him or her. And like you said, the testing scenario or whatever that was, right? Kids these days,
right.
The past year, kids, they had to go to a testing environment worrying about, oh, will I catch COVID? And they had to be masked while they sat and did a highly competitive test that would decide their future for like 3.5 hours.
Right. My heart goes out to, I'm that kind of parent too, that, it's taken me a very, very long time to be more comfortable with, it's the walk. I mean, I can sit here and talk the talk all day long, but it's very hard to really walk the walk. And it goes back to my sticky note that I mentioned in my book, it's not about me. And I think for parents, because the culture is so entrenched, it's personal. It's personal if your kid doesn't do well, doesn't get into the school you anticipate, maybe doesn't go the career path that you anticipate. But if we want our kids to be mentally well and healthy and have good life outcomes, success, satisfaction, all those things that we really do want for our kids, one of the ways to kind of undermine that is to push them either when they're not ready or in a direction they don't want to go, because ultimately they're the ones who need to do the work, study for the test, do the application to get into the school, do the work in the school, apply for the job, and you don't want to see a kid jump through all the hoops, check all the boxes. And I hear this so much from college students who are like, I hated where I ended up. I knew along the way there were signs this wasn't for me. And then they're at this sort of crisis point in their 20s where it's like, now what do I do? And, so we're doing our kids a service, but it's hard. I mean, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it at all. It is really hard.
Okay. So what are some suggestions then you would offer for someone to feel comfortable seeing that B on their test versus A's?
Yeah, I would just shift the expectation, that we're looking for you to, be committed to showing up as your best student self in the situations, but context matters. So again, all those things I mentioned about, everything leading up to the test. Is it reasonable to expect that you would get the A? Can you look at that B as, yeah, okay, so if I had started studying earlier, I might have done better. If I hadn't had that headache, I probably would have learned this material more. If I was getting more sleep, to really look, because if we just look at it as just the grade and then interpret that as to how smart we are, it's inaccurate. It's just it's not good feedback. So I think kids, if they can look at it that way, then they can say things like, okay, every time I don't get enough sleep, I tend to do worse on tests. And they can
So
make a
right there,
decision.
it's an eye opener.
It's an eye opener. If I don't study at least 3 or 4 days ahead of time, I tend not to do well on tests. So when they can start putting those pieces together, instead of just internalizing it, I'm stupid, or I'm lazy, I'm a procrastinator. They come up with all these things, and then that's it. It's like, okay, so are you going to do nothing different? And when they can really come up with some solid, maybe it is like maybe they do have a teacher, and the instruction, it just doesn't marry up for them. So they're not learning well from a certain instructor. Well, other students might be in the class, but it just doesn't work for them. Those are all important things for them to actually put in the calculation of, what does my grade mean?
So this non-quantifiable, non-measuring approach, if we can adopt, at least, to some extent, would that help foster an environment of great thinkers and learners?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't think we have to scrap grades altogether if we're able to shift the importance of grades and maybe look at them. I think we'd have to have a fundamental, new way of looking at grades and their purpose. And, that would kind of have to come from, the educational system, from basically the university systems downward, which you're already kind of seeing that shift with, like ACT, SAT scores, standardized test scores, where the universities are going, well, maybe that isn't the end all be all. And maybe we can make really good admission choices without that information. And so I think the same kind of, shift in thinking, a little bit of a pivot around grading in lower grades could be as beneficial. And then we just have to figure out, how do we measure mastery and communicate progress, learning progress to students. But yeah, I mean, but this is, again, it's going to have to come, the buy-in's going to have to come at that cultural level, then the from society, from employers, universities, administrators, educators, down to parents and students. So, we're going to react as parents, and students are going to react. What does the school want from us? When the school's going to react, what does the university want from us? And the university is going to react, what does the employers want from us? So it's not, if we try to fix it in one place without bringing in all the stakeholders, I don't see how it works.
I guess that can happen when parents respond in a way that they are more accepting of what their student does, correct? I think if that parent support system can bring it to the forefront to the school, I mean, instead of succumbing overall. And I guess that communication aspect that you talked about, that's also automatically going to help the student feel more comfortable that, hey, I have someone got my back, and I can just go talk to my teacher. I can go talk to my parent or my parents or my siblings. And I guess that can help foster a situation where the student automatically is able to, kind of feel more comfortable to receive all the resources that are being put in front of him or her. Don't you think?
I agree. Yeah, they won't be in threat mode.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess, is that like an option, or like a way to go to resolve all the anxiety, burnout, and the aspects that limit student potential currently? Like, probably we are limiting in a myriad of ways.
So the burnout, I think, and I talked a lot about this to parents this year, because I feel like everybody was burned out, our students, parents, educators, I mean, just basically everybody. But the ingredients of that is high pressure, low control, a lot of uncertainty, and lacking meaning. And for students, if you ask students, to check the boxes of those things I just mentioned around school, it'd be like, oh yeah, all of those. And that, that's fueling, you take those cause anxiety. But with that plus low motivation, low control, that's what's burning out our kids. And the problem is you can't just say, get over it. You don't get over burnout. Burnout is like this, basically your body just shuts down and says, I am not doing this. I can't, I won't allow you to do this. And what it's dictating, you need rest, you need to relax. And it's pushing us into, so it might look like, a person in burnout might look like they're being just super lazy, just can't do anything. Well, they really are. They're under functioning because their body and brain are working together to say, whoa, we got to get this person back on track. It's like their tank is empty. And the only way you fill it back up again is to take care of yourself, to get good rest, to give yourself breaks. So to keep pushing through what feels like burnout, even pre-burnout, the more you push yourself, the more you're just going to be in that state of paralysis at some point. And you're going to have to, your mind and body are going to work together to force you to take the break.
And even if we at home as parents or whatever, as the student themselves does not realize the need for it, I guess at that point, owning up to that vulnerability and seeking an expert like you to, kind of assist in the process of resolving that situation becomes important, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I guess a lot of us, we are in denial mode and we don't really think. Talk about that. Yeah. It's like we just think, oh, no, I can get over this. I'm so good at this, right there, then we start to put on our hat of, okay, the expert, right? The jack of all trades.
Well, we start shoulding ourselves. I should be able to do this. I should be, versus what you need to be doing. So I think, sometimes we're our own worst enemy.
Sure. So the college process and testing, we talked about that. And, again, if a student doesn't fall in the 95th percentile in their SAT or they're not over a 30 in the SAT, then what is the message we should be sending here to those students? Are they like a failure, or how can they help better their situation? And based on your experience, have you seen students that are faring really well in school for some reason not get very good scores on their standardized tests?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons students might not, hit that 95th percentile on their testing. So, I mean, there's some cultural limitations to the testing. There are individual differences in testing as far as students who have ADHD, for example, or any executive functioning, kind of weaker areas where, maybe they have trouble concentrating for a long time. Maybe they have some processing issues with transferring, their to the bubble score sheet, putting in there are all kinds of things that make students not great testers, not the least of which is test anxiety, which is a growing problem in our kids. So kids who are starting to get that feedback and they're taking these standardized tests, usually starting around the junior year. And that's about the time that a lot of these kids who are going to hit their rigor tipping point have hit it. So they're already kind of engaging in a little bit of test anxiety because the feedback is not good on a consistent basis from their testing. So it's just it's a self-perpetuating cycle that happens. So there are all kinds of reasons our kids may not be demonstrating their potential through those test scores. And the fact that we have to even ask if it means that they're going to, if they are a failure, if they're not going to make it to college. I mean, that's a function of how we think about these tests. They've gained way more impact than they should. And I like to think of, in a test-free situation, think of the junior who it typically devotes a lot of time to either worrying about and or preparing for those tests and taking those tests over and over again. What could they be doing with that time and that energy? I mean, personally or academically. I mean, that would fundamentally shift the junior year in quite a way. I mean, I hear middle school students will tell me they know about the junior year and they start to worry about it like in 8th grade. And it's like, you shouldn't even know this. So, I hope that particularly colleges are taking a super big chill pill on the value they're placing on these standardized tests. I mean, I think they serve a role. They give some information, but it should not be the end all be all, and it should not be the determining factor or the biggest factor. I think a lot of colleges are seeing, wow, maybe we need to take a more holistic approach to admitting students to college. Let's look at them more broadly, not just the data. And if we can really keep that kind of thinking going, I think we're on the right track.
Okay. So what then if we were to sum up and say as takeaways some different possibilities and ways to improve student life? What would Dr. Jannot's recipe be?
Oh, this is not my strength, because I've been really good at identifying the problem and knowing what's wrong. This is hard. And I think it's hard because it's big. Again, we've been educating humans for centuries. And one person doesn't come in and say, this will fix it. I think it's way too complicated for my brain to kind of come up with, this is the thing to do to improve life for students. But what I do think is that if we focus on letting teachers be involved in this process more heavily, combined with the research of how we understand child development is really important to understand. Psychology is really important to understand. The research behind learning and cognitive processing is really important to understand. The science behind sleep. If we take all those things together and then we look at our current policies, things like attendance policies, the length of the school day, the length of the school year, how many classes the students take, all those kinds of things should be fair game to tweak. And I don't think anybody's going to accept somebody coming in and saying, well, we're eliminating, attendance policy, or we're eliminating, or we're making class times 30 minutes. But how do we not know that a 30-minute class time might not be better, or an extended class time might not be better? We're stuck. We're entrenched in, this is the way we've always done it. And it's just time to say, well, what if? And look at programs that are experimenting with that kind of stuff. And on a small scale, start, pivoting here and there and look at the outcomes.
Wonderful. And your upcoming book release, why don't we talk about that?
So The Disintegrating Student is being re-released. Kensington Publishing is putting it out. The book and audio book will be available July 27th. Any place that you buy books. And you can find out lots of information about me and my books and speaking and all that stuff on my website, JannineJannot.com. I don't blog, but I do have a monthly newsletter called Some Thoughts. And I realized, my Some Thoughts are pretty much a blog, but I send it out the first of the month. So you can sign up for that newsletter on my website if you're interested. And there's links to my social media platforms too.
Oh, highly recommend the newsletter, and
thank you.
All of what you say, and you're a huge proponent of working with students the right way, and I completely appreciate all that you do, and I'm sure many listeners across the globe will find it so useful, because this podcast has, as of now, reached over 1,000 cities worldwide in about 65 countries at least. And
that's awesome.
And I think, this topic of, the peer pressure, the achievement culture, and everything that we find ourselves immersed in, hopefully can change. Because at least if 5 parents, which includes me, hopefully can say, hey, no, I'm okay with whatever school my daughter attends, and I'm okay with owning up to the fact that after all, on one exam, she just did not do well or whatever it may be. I think having those open conversations is going to make students also feel comfortable that they are needing or rather, they are able to resort to the much needed help that they need. And I think that's more than half the battle won right there. Thank you, Dr. Jannot, for such a enlightening conversation one more time. And it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
As always, folks, send me your feedback, and the social media follow is at YP Kumar. And for all things lifestyle and digital media, follow me there. And I'll see you back again next week with yet another interesting guest and yet another interesting topic. Until then, it's Vi saying so long.